There we go. Welcome to the Hip Hop Hustle podcast. I'm extremely excited about my next guest. He doesn't really know why he's on the show, to be honest, when it's called the Hip Hop Hustle. But I'm a big fan. I started following your work, my friend, Daniel Maidman. You'll see him. He's done some really cool stuff. You've got the menu drawings. You've got books out. You've got your own works in museums and in places where they store art. You've been published on the Huffington Post. Like when we talk about art, you've got a list of accomplishments that is pretty amazing. I've always interested to know how you view the things that you've achieved throughout your career thus far.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. When I started out in a serious way with art, I made a list of career goals, and they all seemed impossible, and for a long time they were. And one by one, I was able to reach them. And I think, as in all fields, like the glamour disappears once you're inside. So every once in a while, I have to go back to my list and remind myself that I got what I wanted. But the most satisfying part, it turned out, was just being able to make the work, and everything else is a sort of a vessel to allow the work to reach its audience and allow the world to help support me enough that I can continue making the work. So I'm very, very pleased with all of those things. But as I got them, they they became less pivotal to my experience of what I wanted.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that as you achieved them, the shine almost started to disappear away from them?
I don't know. I really do think that that the glamour disappears inside of anything. I started out in film, and film looks super glamorous from the outside, and from the inside, there's a lot of machinery, a lot of dynamics between people, a lot of work just to make a very complicated system function. And it's not all twinkly light and golden glow the way it seems from the outside. And the type of satisfaction you get from it is very different. And I think it's that way for art as well. It's it's I mean, I think that that glamour itself implies a certain distance from the thing that is glamorized. And once you get close enough, the glamour dissipates, and you find out whether the substance of it really appeals to you. So that substance did appeal to me. It's just that I had a less sort of totemic fixation on the outward markers of success as I was able to achieve them. So there are certain types of emotional satisfaction that I think you don't ever get from a career working out, but you get a different satisfaction that's invisible until you reach it.
Do you think artists would be happier if they stopped focusing on those markers of success and purely focused on the art? Obviously, assuming that they could live and support themselves effectively.
Yes, I think that they would. Okay, so for instance, one of the things that I didn't get was being integrated into the Chelsea art culture. That is an art scene that is simply not interested in the kind of work that I do. And I really wanted it for a long time. And I knew some of the people who were gatekeepers in that sector. And it just never was going to happen. And it bothered me for a long time until I sort of emotionally accepted that the art world has many parts, and that I was welcomed with open arms in other parts that I didn't know existed when it started. So I found my community and they found me, and I've got my people. I have collectors who very much appreciate what I do, and I've been able to do everything else rooting around Chelsea. Like, I'll never get that, but I'll get everything else. And I think that it really bothered me for a long time. And if I'd been able to let it go earlier, I wouldn't have wasted that energy on it. And to the extent that any artist starting out can quickly react uh, to the things that they're categorically not going to get, and appreciate the things they are going to get, and on the whole, once they've got the basic necessities taken care of, concentrate simply on making the work and on doing the very everyday work of promoting it into the world without a sort of a fandom oriented, like, emotional connection to that. I think it would make a lot of artists much happier if they could work that way.
Well, the way you speak, it sounds like the level of maturity needed to be there is at such a like in high level. It would be so impressive for a young person to be able to reach that disconnection between, hey, this is my art. It's also a reflection of who I am. And then when people are not supportive or people who are not in your corner, how to separate the criticism and even separate the praise from who you actually are internally.
Yes. And I think that it's very difficult. And I as you mentioned, I've done a lot of art writing. And along with the art criticism, I wrote a lot of articles that were basically addressed to me about the mindset that I thought would be useful to have and that I wanted to have. So I taught myself by writing these ideas into being. And and oh, we're talking about young. Oh, yeah, it's tough when you're really young to let go of that stuff. Um, and the quicker you can learn, the better. And you'll wind up getting most of that stuff anyway, and you'll find out that I mean, if you persist, this is very much a game of persisting. And that requires judgment as well, because maybe you're not very good at it, and maybe there's something else you'd be better at that you'd be happier in. I was not very good at film. I get good at things slowly, and film rewards people who get good at things quickly. And I was not good at film community politics. So, and it took me a long time to accept that, and that was time that I could have been doing something else. I don't regret it, but that was a lot of time. And so there's a whole chain of decisions that you have to make along your way to an art career. But having that career does require persistence, and the persistence does involve developing a thick enough skin to detach both criticism and praise from from your emotional self-perception. And I know that with artists, their work is themselves. And yeah, you're going to encounter a lot of people who are like, I reject the work and I reject you. Um, but it's okay, because you'll also find your people, and those are the people whose support will buoy you up when you need it. But mostly what you want to do as a young artist is forge a stronger connection to the work itself. Like, as a young artist, you have years and years of practice required to get good enough that your technique supports your vision. And you have to maintain the vision in the face of all that technique, because you can become so oriented towards technique that you forget why you're doing it in the first place. And those are all internal challenges that have nothing to do with career. They have to do with your interface with the art itself. And that is absolutely the most fundamental thing. And so keeping that front and center in your practice, I think, and not obsessing too much about the external markers is a good path forward for a beginning artist.
Yeah, I think, as you speak, I'm thinking about my own art and how I've done art through school. I have never really thought I was a good artist. And as I've gotten older, I've started to think that maybe the art I was trying to make was not the art that I was feeling, and that for whatever reason, was not separate. I was not intuitive enough to actually tap into something that was within myself. I was trying to create something that was so far away, objectively beautiful as opposed to subjectively beautiful. And I don't know, I think it's this weird place of, when I think about it, everyone has artistic expression, and it's about finding your version of that that fits you the most, that you enjoy making, but also you can look back and go like, yeah, that is an accurate representation of who I am.
Were you able to work your way through that process until you found the art that you were meant to be making?
Well, I found that performance is my big thing. I like being on stage. I like public speaking. It's weird. I have a podcast, so I like communicating with people. But I started a journey this year of writing. I write a thought a day every day for the full year. That was like my New Year's resolution, which I never keep, except somehow I'm keeping this one. And I started thinking that next year maybe I'll start drawing or painting, or find that physical expression on canvas to see what I could kind of get out of myself. Because because when I went to New York and I saw pieces, I was like, I never thought any of this was possible. It is literally whatever you can come up with. Everyone has their own style.
That's marvelous. Well, I hope that it's a great year for you doing that. I'll look forward to see. Are you going to be posting it? I don't. This comes up against another thing. I also think that a beginning artist should take time to not show work to people. This used to be a lot easier before social media and before this idea that you had to be constantly posting in order to demonstrate that you are making things. Your project sounds like something that maybe you want to keep it to yourself for a while. Um,
Yeah.
if you're posting it, I will be thrilled to see it, but I'm not going to encourage you to post it before you've had time alone with the work. Time alone with the work is fundamental.
I might just have to send it to you privately.
Okay, I'd love to see it.
Because my brother started painting recently, actually. He went traveling for 12 months. So my
Hmm.
youngest brother, and he just started drawing in his notepad. And now he's started to paint and do abstract works. And now he's started to look at clay figures. And that's the path he wants to go down. And I'm like, that is awesome. Like, I've always thought that he had some artistry in him. It's hard to know what it is until you start doing it, but he genuinely really enjoys it. And I mean, so where I am filming, there's an attic above me. That's where my brother goes and has all paints in there and canvases. So yeah, I think seeing part of him do that has inspired me as well to be like, if he can, then so can I.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm very happy for him as well. That's the very creative family. Are your parents artists?
No, we were
No.
always like the this. So it's really weird. I was reflecting on this. We were always taught like the base, you know, markers of success: English,
Hmm.
maths, science, those types of things. Very sporty family, but
Hmm.
I think I did drama in high school. That kind of helped my creativity. But outside of that, we didn't really do extracurricular creativity things. It was mostly just athletics and academics, which were
Hmm.
pushed. I was awful at instruments. That was just something I never picked up. But I
Uh-huh.
think as I'm getting older and as my brothers are getting older, we're discovering these things about ourselves.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I had my dad is a professor and my mom was an executive while we were little to help support the family. But now that she's been able to retire, she's gone back to what she was doing when we were little, which was an artist. So I ha always had support in both the arts and academics. And you know, my parents were like, whatever you want to do, we'll support you. So I was very fortunate that way. And we had a lot of art and literature around the house.
How do they view what you've managed to accomplish?
I think well, I mean, I know they're proud of me, and I think they are relieved that I got some of the things that I wanted because it was clear that I wasn't going to be happy unless I got to live a life more or less similar to the life that I'm leading. And they would not have wanted me to be unhappy. So I think it was a huge relief to them that something worked out. And you know, film was a disaster, and I really wanted that from when I was a teenager. And I only had the sense to move on from it in my 30s. Um, and I think that that was probably really rough for them, seeing me struggling like that and not getting where I wanted to go. But I've always had a lot of my life that wasn't the core thing that I was doing. So I enjoyed a lot of other things during that period, and my average happiness level is naturally pretty high. Um, so that's far afield from the question, but I think they're really happy for me. And you know, they get a kick out of me being published in different places and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting that it took you so long to realize the film wasn't the
Hmm.
thing for you.
I have irrationally high self-confidence, which is really good for persisting at getting good at things, but it's really bad for realizing when you're off track. So it takes me a long time to recognize mistakes. And you know, when you decide when you're 13 that you want to make movies, you're not at that time, the technology for filmmaking was inaccessible enough that there was no solid evidence one way or another until I was in my 20s whether or not I was going to be any good at it. And then once I moved to Los Angeles and I encountered the sort of social web of the film world and realized that I couldn't navigate it and I didn't have the temperament to work my way up through it, and was shooting shorts that were really, they had certain elements that worked, but many more elements that did not work. Like they're very visual, but the writing wasn't great, and I was doing the writing. It took me a lot of years to get good at writing, and I got good at writing long after I had left film. So I was not coordinating all of those elements into something that worked, but it was promising, and so it was difficult when you had a strong bias in favor of thinking you're awesome to discern that it's really not happening. Um, Let me think. I was 30 exactly when I got over it. So I've had like a long time since then to do other things. I think it was worth it. I had a really good time. I mean, it was frustrating, but I met a lot of amazing people and I did a lot of work that I liked. And I played with a lot of ideas that have contributed in my film and writing, or my art and writing since then. So yeah, it was good.
For anyone wondering about the social dynamics of the film industry,
Yeah.
would you be able to describe it of what it was like when you experienced it?
I was encountering the very outer edges of it. Uh, so I bumped into a lot of crew people, and I am very, very bad at working for anyone apart from myself. I have never been able to hold down an office job, and there were opportunities to start at the PA level, um, or as some kind of a grip, and I was like, no, 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 I'm just going to go ahead and direct things, and that's stupid. Um, I had not gone to one of the film schools that gives you entree. I would run into actors, some of whom were very kind, uh, who were not like movie stars, but recognizable. Um, and but the substance of how people were relating to each other remained mysterious to me. And I only realized that it was mysterious once I moved to New York and I got to know the art scene. And like the art world is not that big. I don't know how many people are actively involved in the, multifaceted art world in New York relative to the film world in Los Angeles. I think it's a smaller number of people, but I didn't find it difficult to figure out who was connected with whom and in what ways, and to wind up in the right room to be talking to the right person. And also having gone through this nightmare of like that the one that trying to socialize in film was very unpleasant, um because I don't like walking into a room wanting something from people. I want to enjoy people. I don't want to use people as an instrument to get something that I want. I found it very uncomfortable. And so having gone through that with film, when I was starting with art, that was also happened to some extent, but less so. And I was able to cordon it off and reduce it. And I was able to figure out who my friends were and to interact with them as friends and not as people seeking an advantage from one another. And this was not the goal, but by simply seeking to participate and to have a good time with people, I wound up getting much farther than I think I would have if I had kept on asking for things. And film people are, I think, more insular, and I think they defend their territory. The ones that I knew defended their territory much harder than the art people that I wound up hanging out with. My art community is a very open community. Like, you know, if you show up and you're dedicated to your work and you're of goodwill, you'll find a place. And that's not the uh that's not that's I'm in much more of a figurative classical scene, but we absorb new people when they come by. We're happy to have new people. Um, I think film is quite defensive. I think the Chelsea sector of the art world is quite defensive. Although who knows, I didn't hang out with them for very long because they didn't like my work. And you kind of have to like each other's work. So mapping the art world, including the parts of it that I didn't get into, was relatively easy. Mapping the film world was very, very difficult. The interior connections were obscure. And we're talking about like the late 90s and the early 2000s. I don't know how it is now because there's just an army of online people who spend all their time figuring this stuff out. I think that if you were a dedicated pattern interpreter now, you could work your way through it and figure out all of the internal connections without being an insider. Um, but even that level of analytic insight eluded me in my 20s. So it remained enigmatic.
Well, to be honest, I don't think that sounds particularly fun to spend my time mapping it all out in this. You know what I mean? I don't think
Right?
anyone should enter a career and start mapping anything out. I think you're right. We've all been in conversations where you feel like the other person's trying to get something from you. It just
Yes.
feels a lack of emotion, a lack of connection, and it just feels off. And I think
Uh-huh.
being in an industry where you feel that would just be awful. It would
Yeah.
just drive you crazy for the rest of your life, I think.
I think there are a lot of crazy people in Los Angeles. I'm hesitating to generalize from my experience to an overall take on the scene because, first of all, my experience is now a couple decades out of date, and second of all, maybe I was just an asshole. I mean, it could have just been me. I don't think it was. I think everyone was horrible in that way because everybody has such a craving. Like film of all of the arts has so much potential reward and so much apparent glamour that it attracts swarms of people who have an almost addictive uh, craving for rewards inside of that field. And I think that breeds that kind of behavior. Um, so that part of it is very unhappy. But I couldn't say if that was everyone else's experience. That was my experience, and I didn't like it about myself. And so when I eventually got over my passion for the internal art making part of it, I was incredibly happy to leave behind the ambition part of it.
Well, I see the same in music. I think
Yeah.
the more corporate things become, the more dog eat dog world it becomes, and the desire to leapfrog the next artist becomes more prevalent. I mean, I've been fortunate to speak to a lot of artists, and everyone believes they're the best, but everyone believes that they deserve more. And it's
Ooh,
interesting to talk to a lot of people who believe they deserve more, because there is only so much that each of us really deserves, and the rest is earned
right.
from work that you do. Um, so it's just interesting to see the mindset, and I think a lot of it is told, like, you have to have this mindset, because if you don't, well, then you're not going to succeed. And I am starting to think that potentially being in reality with yourself is the true mindset you should have, because it allows you to make decisions and make art that is true, as opposed to what you think people want to hear.
Yeah. In terms of that outward stuff, I have taken a position uh, of not really trying not to want specific things all that much, because in my experience, if you want something specific, the odds are good you won't get it. But if you remain open to good things happening, odds are good they'll happen. And what happens will be a surprise to you, but most of the time it will be satisfying. You can have like very general career goals and then be open to the path that your actual career goes, having a high degree of surprise and variability. And if you're not fixated on specific individual cookies and treats, you'll just be delighted by what happens. I've been delighted by all the things that have happened, and most of them were not things that I planned or wanted in advance.
I think that's such a good mindset to have. It's like you remove the headlights and you start to see the whole view, and you start to
No.
see, oh, perhaps there is something else out there that catches my eye more than the thing I thought I wanted. Even though I'm getting closer to that, you're like, oh, I'm distracted by something else I couldn't even perceive at the time. I think a lot of people fall into that trap of, I said I'm going to do it, so that's the only thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to destroy the other potentials just because I'm stubborn and I won't bend my will in order to see a better opportunity.
Yeah, things want the if you have work to offer, the world will find some form of appreciation to offer back, and you just have to be open to it. And I, I can't say yes to everything, but I say yes to as much as I can, uh, because it's all exciting. And if I'm getting to do my work, then the form it takes in the context of some particular side quest is just, it's great.
Can I ask you something that I have pondered about since seeing your art is why the human form? I think everyone has an idea of what it could be, but I'm interested in yours of what is it that inspires you to continually draw it in different shapes and manifestations and different people.
Okay. First of all, it's doing it well is very challenging. Uh, and so it's just a great challenge when you're starting. And you're like, if I can do this, then I'm really doing something very exciting. But also, I think that the way I see human beings uh, is the sort of physically we're the most graceful machines that I'm aware of in the universe. And also, there's a soul inside of us. And so, if you look hard enough, the machine becomes transparent, and looking at it, you look through it towards the inwardness of the person. And the themes that communicate with us and that are of interest to us are, for the most part, themes having to do with the human experience, and the human experience is embodied in human beings. And I don't have uh, I've had to train myself very hard to have a sense of narrative. Um, but I have a strong sense of form. So my drawings don't have a whole lot of narrative content. They have a lot of forms in them, but those forms do lead inward. And so you have challenge upon challenge of drawing the figure as a physical object, and then learning to draw the figure as a set of mechanical dynamics. And beyond that, capturing mood and personality and soul. And I find that endlessly rewarding. And you never see the same thing twice. Uh, you could look at my work and be like, well, it's all figures. But to me, each one is its own world, with its own unique characteristics and fascinations, and so I don't get bored with it. I want to draw figures all the time. So I guess that's an answer.
Yeah, well, it's definitely an answer. Yeah, it's interesting because when I'm looking at it and when I look through the people that you draw and when you're going through it, it's like in a way my mind feels the backstory of like what their life could be, because there is this one piece, and I think looking at it before, and the textures of the skin is also impeccable. It feels like if I could brush my hand across it, it would feel like a normal person would feel. But there is one where it's just a hand on, I think, a hip, and the indentation, and I'm all of a sudden being like, I wonder what she's gone through. She's got a fuller figure, and it's just, I think humans have this weird thing, and maybe it's just because I enjoy your art that I'm trying to fill in the story of what this person's life is actually like. I'm trying to understand them in order to get a bigger picture of that one small snapshot.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I do think that we naturally we have empathy. We assume that the people we look at have their own story, and when the artwork doesn't provide it, we'll fill it in. And I want my people to have to bring history and bring personality to the drawing, and then allow the viewer to complete the experience the way that you're describing. I'm really glad that it strikes you that way.
Because I've wondered, how do you choose the people and the figures that you're going to draw or attempt to show in their shape?
Well, let's see. The drawings that you're looking at are a mix of drawings from life and drawings from photo reference. So drawings from life tend to be either models that I know from life drawing workshops in New York, or traveling models who are coming through New York and have gotten in touch with me and asked if I'd be interested in working together, which I'll generally say yes to if I can. And then with photo reference tends to be, models that I've bumped into on Instagram. And the ones that I draw a lot are ones who have some element of uh, their sense of pose in relation to the structure of their body, or the types of photography that they wind up participating in, uh, that challenges me and speaks to me and is often something new that I haven't thought of before and that I feel sympathetic with. And so I'll keep working with them. In terms of life drawing, there's a combination of that and also us getting along well conversationally. Because I talk the whole time that I'm drawing. I have the talking part of my brain is completely disconnected from the drawing part. So I'm chatting with models the whole time I'm in the studio. So it has to be somebody that I can talk with for hours and hours and hours. So the models that I work with in person are friends of mine in the end, and so that's a combination of like the artistic inspiration, but also having a lot to talk about. Um, and I've had a lot of really good collaborations with models over the years that have lasted for a very long time. So that's pretty much how that works.
As you said, I talk and I draw at the same time. I'm like, I can't imagine doing that because I'm just like, okay, stop talking to me. I need to focus. I'm trying to do something hard. And
Right.
you're just like, going about your thing and having a conversation. I think that would be fun to be able to
Hmm.
do to disconnect. It's like it's a weird magic trick in a way of you being able
Hmm.
to have a conversation and do your art at the same time.
Yeah, I love it. It's so much fun. And in life drawing workshops, where you're quiet because it's a group of people and everyone's drawing, I get a lot of thinking time because that verbal part of my brain is still not engaged. So I have interesting thoughts while I'm drawing, and I love that as well. Although I can't get to life drawing workshops as much anymore because my studio is still in Brooklyn, but I moved upstate and I'm down here a couple days a week. So I go back and forth, and most of my drawing sessions are private at this point. So I haven't had that kind of extended thinking time during life drawing in a long time.
Well, maybe it's time to go back and give yourself a new experience again.
Yeah, that would be nice. Switching the way you're doing things is always great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I also wanted to ask you about the an unknown man of the modern age. Because
Uh-huh.
I found the title interesting in and of
Hmm.
itself. And
Hmm.
then also the drawings that you had were
Oh, those are
interesting.
paintings.
Oh, paintings. See,
Yeah.
to me, I'm like, I can't tell the difference. All I knew was that I was drawn to it.
Oh.
But but yeah, I was interested. And then there's this, I think there are two figures, a king and a queen in there
Hmm.
as well. And I'm just interested in the title and what it meant to you as you embarked on making those works.
I was thinking about, well, okay, so I listened to a lot of history podcasts while I'm working. And when I started on that, I was listening to Mike Duncan's Revolutions podcast, because I'd listened to his History of Rome podcast, and then when he finished with the part of Roman history he was interested in, he started a podcast that was a history of different revolutions, and he covered the chain of failed revolutions in the mid 19th century in Europe. So there were a couple of years there where it looked like the entire political order in Europe was going to collapse and be reformed along more liberal, open lines. And then one by one, all the revolutions were crushed. And the existing political order managed to hold out, I suppose, more or less until World War One. And that was kind of like a really interesting historical passage, because a very different late 19th and early 20th century Europe could have happened quite easily. But they managed to successfully put it down. And at the time that I was listening to that, it was in the aftermath of a sort of like a crisis of public confidence in the legitimacy of government in Europe and America in like around 2015 or so. So, that was like the period where there was a lot of upheaval. Like there was Brexit, there was Trump, there were a lot of mass movements offering answers to political problems that were outside of the existing political paradigm. And that obviously was, you could tell from the responses that it was very threatening to the entrenched political order. And there were, crackdowns in response to it. And it seemed like we were entering into an age of unrest and turbulence, which I don't think has quite ended. I think that we're in it now. But so when I was thinking about that, I was also thinking about the journey of some generic individual through such a period of transformation. And there are two male figures among that group of paintings. So there's one that's like a young male nude holding a fasces and facing a tower, which suggests some kind of rebellion against an order, but the character of the order and the character of the rebellion remain ambiguous. And there is another figure, a stooped older man, quite tall, standing alone on a beach facing out to sea, and looking at the shore in front of him. And I imagined those as the same person at different points in his life. And there's a third painting called His Mother as He Remembers Her, that's a little baby grabbing his mother's cheek. And that was him at the beginning. And so the entire body of paintings was a sort of very loose biography of someone moving through this age of change, and their ambivalence about the nature of change and the ambiguity of what exactly had changed by the end of it. So if it has a narrative, that's the narrative, and everything else kind of fits loosely into it. And I don't think that anything more specific can be drawn from it than that, because I mean, it's possible, but nothing more specific went into it than that, I can tell you for sure. So I spent a very happy maybe 9 or 10 months doing all the paintings in that show, and
Oh.
I kind of figured out a way to paint that was somewhat similar to the drawings. I only used white and gray. It's all white and gray paint. It's like walking into the gallery before there were people in it was very weird. It looked like bright and blurry because everything, like your sense of where the darks were was off, because there were no darks. All the darks were gray. I had a really good time with that. I loved that show, and so that was the last one that I did before the lockdowns. That was, I think, 2019, something like that.
Well, I think you're definitely right. We're still in a world of turbulence, so I think the forecast, unfortunately, seems to be correct with regards to the way the world is. I mean, I do wonder whether it's like the way the news is and the way social media is, and potentially for the regular person, if you walk down the street, you wouldn't feel the turbulence that seems to be in the background of all our lives. I think that's the weird thing about life, is that there is so much that happens outside of your direct consciousness that you almost have no choice but to only control the very small circle that you operate within.
Yeah, and it's tough to perceive the scale of it. It's so big, and its turning radius is so enormous that apart from certain critical moments, it's easy to think that things right now are the way things were in the past and they will continue in the future. But we're going on like maybe 5 years now where it's impossible to say what things are like 6 months in the future. And that was not the case for most of my life. You know, if you were like in 1992, 1993 wasn't going to be all that different. Um, but if you're in 2019, 2020 is going to be different. 21 is going to be different, and we cannot predict the ways that they'll be different. So we are going through interesting times.
Yeah, I think technology is expanding exponentially and at a
Hmm.
scary rate. I go through moments emotionally where I'm like, this is going to be amazing for us, or this is going to cripple us. And I
Hmm.
cannot figure out which one it is. But all I
Hmm.
know is I'm going to be either an early adopter, I'm going to run away in the woods and live like a very simple life. And I don't know which I'm going to choose either. So it's like this. I don't know. It's like everything I saw as a kid in terms of what was possible is now all of a sudden becoming possible with
Hmm.
robotics, with AI. And I'm like, damn, like the science fiction is not so much fiction.
Right. Yeah, this AI business is kind of interesting because it came out of nowhere, like within the past year or so, and all of a sudden it's everywhere. And that's very strange. And it's the both on there's the text and there's the visual AI modules. And I didn't know that they had made that much progress. Did you know? Like
No.
all of a sudden it turns up and I was like, what the hell? Like we were told that this was not possible for a very long time.
And
And
now
now they're
not
here.
only is it possible, it's
Mhm.
really good.
And
The
it's ubiquitous.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you feel about it being able to
Oh,
generate image?
I'm not that interested in it. And I should be. But like there have always been technological advances on visual art. Like my whole life, there's been something to be excited about. And when I started out, I was like, I'm going to be excited about this and that, and like the next thing. And then I was like, you know what? I'm excited about pencil and paper. And I am going to leave it to other people to be excited about these things because they do not fundamentally speak to me. At the point where I can plug something into my head and make a movie, then I'm interested. And AI is getting close. I think that I am going to live to be able to mentally generate the film that I started out wanting to make, and that's exciting to me. And when I stopped with film, I was like, at some point I'll be able to just generate this virtually, and I'm going to come back and do that. Until then, the like massive physical apparatus of filmmaking wins. I lose. I can't beat this. But AI is getting really close, and I think that you're going to have some kind of a headset rig within the next 10 to 15 years where you put it on, you have a very finely tunable interface with the AI, and you're able to generate a photorealistic motion picture. And at that point, it will become interesting to me, but not because of its contribution to me as a visual artist, but its contribution to like my latent filmmaker side. As a visual artist, I am content with the media that have been available for hundreds or thousands of years. And like, you know, the actual art being generated by AI just seems to me like the sort of overcomplicated imagery from a dream you can't really remember very well. And if you could sit down and remember it, it would be weightless and pointless. I find it a little bit depressing. And it's getting better, but like there are two key problems with it. One of them is that I go to art because I want communion with human beings. Uh, if it's not giving me that, then I don't want it. It's not giving me the experience that I want. That communication from one soul to another through some visible medium. AI only does not offer anything from the other side of that equation. So I don't care how good it is. It's not giving me what I want. And you know, people are like, well, you won't be able to tell the difference between human and AI, so you'll be presented with art. Be like, okay, yeah, assault me with that when it happens, and I'll deal with it then. But like, I'm not going to make myself crazy being like, well, you can't really tell the difference. The other thing is that AI generates too much material. There's an upper limit to how much a person can integrate before it becomes overwhelming, and in that overwhelming quality, there's a sense of futility, and in the futility, there's despair. And I do not want to be confronted with 1 million masterpieces. I want to be confronted with 70 masterpieces that were made by human beings who slaved to get good at it. I don't care what AI makes. So That's I guess that's why it continues to feel fundamentally irrelevant to me, regardless of its output.
Well, I tend to agree with you
No,
that that there is something, and it goes back to almost the beginning where you were saying there was that people have souls, and there
mm-hmm,
is something about someone choosing to go through the difficulty of creating something, and there
mm-hmm,
is pain and suffering, and there is time, and there is sweat, tears, blood, whatever you need, but there is something in terms of the expense that is
mm-hmm,
left at the end of the process. And
yeah,
I think that's underrated. When if it becomes too easy, then it almost doesn't become as valuable. And there is
yeah,
something to be said about that, about, hey, you really had to work hard to achieve this. You really had to become an expert in your field. You had to push your boundaries. You had to really test yourself when you thought you couldn't.
mm-hmm,
That's what makes art in its essence beautiful, because there is something about the process as opposed to, I'm just going to imagine it and then it's there. And then
mm-hmm,
it's like, what is that?
mm-hmm,
I don't think, I think I'd want it, but I don't think it's good for us. It takes
mm-hmm.
away emotion. It takes away what art truly is.
Yeah, and this issue came up earlier with photography, and it's taken photography most of its history for photographers to be able to assert themselves in a way that says, yes, I am a creator, because the mechanical quality of the camera made it possible to produce a beautiful image without that passion to get there. And photographers really put a lot of work into reckoning with that and taking responsibility for the making of their work in a way that elevated it from a mechanical product into an art form. And I think that AI represents a similar challenge, but much more intensely than photography did, because AI will auto-generate meaning for you.
Yeah. And it'll be available for literally every person.
Yes.
Like if you
Yeah, it's
got the
just a
internet, you've got AI. And especially now, it's just a race. They're all
mm-hmm,
racing to have the best AI. I mean, people are going to have robots in their homes at some point. I know Elon Musk has talked about it. Like it is just at that point now where I think we're forgetting what it is to be human. I think this is part of our evolution to like becoming part human, part robot. But
mm-hmm,
we're forgetting about the beauty of and the flawed nature of what it is to be human, and reconciling with that. I think we've stopped doing that. We're like, all right, we're flawed. Instead of reconciling the flaws and learning
mm-hmm.
how to accept those and get better and go through that process, we're like, let's just fix it with AI and technology and forget about all those problems and all those things that actually make us
Mm-hmm.
unique and special.
Yeah, I over the past few years, and this has gone from being something that you automatically did to something you had to make a conscious decision to do. I've put in a lot of effort to see my friends in person, because we have a lot of digital mediation now that makes it possible to interact with your friends without seeing them. And I really like to show up and spend time with my friends. And I think that the reinforcement, we're not solitary creatures. We become human in contact with human beings. And I think that that time that you spend with people reminds you that you're a person. And so that partial inhumanity that you're describing, I think, is in part enabled by us spending too much time socializing online, because there's a smooth gradient between interacting with a person online to interacting with a chat bot to interacting with base machinery. And our brains are not adapted to understand the distinctions and to maintain their sense of identity outside of direct physical contact with human beings. So I think that us, tweeting at each other and posting at each other is part of that syndrome that you're describing.
And I think COVID had a significant impact on the push
Mm-hmm.
towards digitization. And
Yes.
I think about kids, honestly. A lot of kids are going through, social anxiety, and it's because through your formative years, you spent 2 years essentially being told people are unsafe, you can't go outside, you can't go to school, you have to mask up. And what it did to them socially
Mm-hmm.
really impacts them. And I think we as a society are still going to feel the impacts of the generation. I mean, as an adult, it impacted me not being able to
Mm-hmm.
go outside. We had one of the toughest lockdowns here in Melbourne in the world.
Right.
But
I read about yours.
yeah, but I think as an adult, you're a bit more equipped to deal with difficulty and hardship. But as a kid, you need to be with your friends. You need to feel the natural social hierarchy that is at school. You need to be able to go outside, play on the playground, and be what it is to be a kid. And to have playgrounds roped off and have an hour a day outside, I was like, how is this good for us long term? Like, it's just going to be untenable at a point.
I mean, I think that in like maybe 20 years, we're going to have a generation of serial killers because they missed out on the empathy forming period of childhood. I don't think you get that back. I think that there's going to need to be some kind of, mass therapy and socialization program because you're going to have a lot of asocial people who are incapable of recognizing the humanity of the people around them. I think that it is very, very dangerous what happened to those children.
I agree. But I
Yeah.
do think that conversation and art helps.
Yes.
I think, when you look at art, there's, and it can be any piece of art, but, if you can find a piece that moves you, you kind of do get a sense of other people. You do get a
That
sense of like empathy.
I think that's that communion that I like. I think of communion and identification with as like core elements of the experience of art. And when you have narrative art like books or movies, good movies, that identification with allows you to lead the lives that are inside those stories. And that is a form of socialization that when you say that art will play a role in helping these people reassemble their shattered humanity, I think that is correct. I think that they are going to be able to experience things that they were not able to experience in their lives through art, and that will help bring them back to people. And so, that's a hopeful take on it. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, I've had that experience myself. You live a million different lives in books, and you're able to have conversations in art with people who've been dead for hundreds of years. And you join the community of human beings. It's great. So,
Well, that's how I felt when I read George Orwell's 1984.
hmm
I was a teenager and I read it, and it like just blew my mind. I think it shaped me as like what it meant to be a person in a different world, and it made me wonder how I would be in that world, and
yeah,
whether the main character is in fact a bad person or he is as good as you're going to get in a society like that. And then I think it just takes you out of this. I don't know. It struck me purely because of the Machiavellian nature of it all.
hmm
And so even still, it's one of my favorite books of all time.
that is a terrifying novel.
Yeah.
There, I read that from the moment that he started showing it to people, it was treated almost like it was cursed because it was so horrific. I mean, that's a masterpiece. That book is flawless. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember getting into an argument with my English teacher at the time about
hmm
the idea of what a hero was. Because my argument was, and I still believe to this day, he is the hero, as
Yeah.
in his liberation and what he tried to do, which ultimately failed, was as good as you're going to get in our society. You're not going to get a Superman who's good looking, handsome, charming, who's just eloquent with everything he says. That is not that society. It doesn't make sense in that world. So
hmm
for him to be beaten down, old, flawed, but still to try and rise up and fight back, that's his version of being a hero. And I think there is something to take from that for all of us, that you don't have to be the archetype of a hero, but you can be your version of a hero, whatever that looks like.
Yes, yes. The we all have access to heroic qualities. Doesn't mean we have to be perfect. I always assumed he was to be taken as a hero. Though what's horrific about that book is the description of a state machinery capable of destroying a person who actually has integrity and a sense of selfhood, and the way that they vivisect it and reduce it to a part in their machine uh, is what makes that book so powerful. That everything has been thought of and planned for.
Yeah. It makes me really
Yeah.
want to talk to him, to George
Orwell?
Orwell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
Have you
me,
read it? Makes
sorry.
you. No, go on.
I was just going to say, it just makes me want to sit in a room and just talk to him and see his perspective on the world. I mean, he's read so many, created so many transformative books for the
Hmm.
world we live in, but I'm always interested in the person behind the art that they make.
Yeah. That would be great if you could sit down with Orwell. It's his other books are terrific too. I went through a long period as a teenager reading a lot of Orwell. Uh, The Road to Wigan Pier, Homage to Catalonia, um, Coming Up for Air, which is treated as a kind of a prequel to 1984. I did not read his journalism, like his straight journalism or his essays. We had a copy of Shooting an Elephant, which was a book of essays. That was my dad's copy, and I remember it was an olive green cover, and there was a rubber band holding it together because the spine had broken. And he was like, "Oh, don't read that copy; it's falling apart." And I never did read it. But Orwell's great. Like I think that teenagers should all read Orwell. He's fantastic.
Agreed. It
Yeah.
kind of teaches you about fighting against the machine a little bit, about,
Yes.
yeah, standing up
Yeah.
for what you believe is right. Do you have a
And
book that sticks out for yourself,
oh, like for like from Orwell or just in
just in
general?
general?
Uh, The Plague by Camus is formed a lot of the basis for my sense of morality. Uh, Remembrance of Things Past by Proust really gave me a strong sense of the outer limits of comprehension of people in people and how they interact with each other, and it's just wonderful. Um, I found the Alexandria Quartet very exciting and romantic. Um, Hebdomeros by Giorgio de Chirico, which is a novel by this surrealist painter. It's terrific. You know, I guess The Possessed by Dostoevsky about the nature of evil. Um, I mean, there's so many good books. The Baroque Cycle by Neil Stevenson was just a gorgeous portrait, sweeping portrait of the emergence of modernity out of the late Middle Ages and out of the monarchical period in Europe. Uh,
Yeah. I
what else? Rodin on art. Rodin has it's a book of interviews with Rodin. It's amazing. Read that one as a teenager as well. I don't know. I mean, I can
Yeah,
keep going.
yeah. This is going to turn into a book podcast,
Yeah.
which, to be honest, I don't mind actually
Uh-huh.
talking about books. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel myself that I'm not as in tuned to reading books as I once was, just with the
Hmm.
nature of the tech. But I have been trying more to read books and sit down and take the time to actually have the pages in front of me and read them, as opposed to just, the quick videos. I think there
Yeah.
is, the patience required gives you
Hmm.
something at the end of it.
Yeah. I've got a novel out. Did you come across that in your research on me?
I did, but
Hmm.
I forgot the name of the novel.
The Exile of Zanzibar. And I've been writing it since 2005. I It took that long because I was learning how to write a novel for most of the time. But the next one will be much quicker. But it's a fantasy novel. And I, you know, published it this past year, and it's doing pretty well, and I'm happy about that. But I really love books.
So what's
Books
your
are great.
next one? Do you know when you want to release the next one?
I'd like to get it done in the next 2 to 3 years. And the Exile of Zanzibar was the first of a projected seven. It's an epic fantasy story, and so that novel is the beginning of the story, and it has many leagues to go. And so I'm working on the second one, and I'm writing it right now. I'm really enjoying it, and it's going much faster and more easily than the first one, because the process for the individual novel is for me a process of allowing life to percolate and ideas to percolate through the narrative and make it rich and dense, and then writing it all down. And that process doesn't have to take 17 or 18 years. All of that time was spent writing a lot of art criticism, in part as a means of learning to communicate through language, and to learn how to have the voice of the prose in the novel. So it worked. It was just a very laborious process.
Well, I'm gonna have to read it because I wanna be on the journey of the 7-book journey, so I can be like, hey, have you guys read these 7 books? Because I have. I'm fanboying right here, and I can be one of the people who can be like an early discoverer before you have your own chronicles.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy it. And you feel free to shoot me questions as you're reading it. I love hearing from people who are reading it. So
Oh, I will
yeah.
for sure. Well, speaking of questions, I only have one more for you. I feel like I could
Sure.
just ask you and pepper you with questions all day. Because I find your thought process and your thoughts interesting. But this is the only question that I plan on the show. It's the only question that I spent time thinking about, to be honest.
Okay.
However, if you could recommend one album that everybody should listen to at least once to get an appreciation of, what would it be?
Okay. The Capella Romana, Lost Voices of Hagia Sophia. This is an album of Byzantine church music recorded by a group in a studio, but what they did was they used the most cutting edge of acoustical science to create an Hagia Sophia filter. So it sounds like it's being sung in Hagia Sophia, uh, in Constantinople back in the day. It's gorgeous,
That
so
is
beautiful.
awesome. And I can
Yeah.
tell you, I can guarantee you, no one ever on the show has mentioned that piece of work. So
Awesome. I'm glad I had something to say.
well, you came out really quick. I mean, the amount of people who have no idea, they're always like the faces that I get when I ask that question. But yeah, it came really quickly to you. And yeah, I love projects that people very rarely talk about. I think that's the point of the question, is to get into the mind of what stands out to people. By the end of the podcast, at some point, I'm going to have hundreds, thousands of albums that you can listen back to that influenced and shaped people.
That one has had a big influence on me over the past few years. I really love it.
Awesome. Well, speaking of influence, obviously Daniel Maidman came through. I appreciate your time. This was a wonderful conversation. And as I said, I really enjoyed getting to know you and getting to know the person behind the art. For anyone who hasn't checked him out, please check him out on Instagram. You've also got your website. There's lots of works. As I said, you can see him in museums. You write. But yeah, is there anything I might let you do the plugs of your own work? But is there anything you wanted to plug? Where can people best find you?
Probably your two best bets are at Daniel Maidman on Instagram for drawings, current drawings. And if you check my website, you'll find paintings and other work. And then if you're interested in my writing, go to Amazon and type in my name, Daniel Maidman, and you'll find my novel, which I'm very proud of, and a book called Theseus, which I'm also very proud of, which is a book-length interview with the painter Vincent Desiderio, who is a substantial philosopher of art. And we had a long, I think it's like maybe a 5-hour conversation. I was like, we got to do a book of this. We recorded it. It was for an article, but it was way more than I needed for the article. So we made a book, and it treats a lot of the themes that are of great interest to him. And I was fortunate enough to be his interlocutor in that exploration of his ideas, and I am very proud of that book. So that's on like philosophy of art. We talk about a lot of different painters, films, ideas, philosophers. It's really cool. Yeah, so those are the two books that are available. So check me out on Amazon and Instagram, I would say.
I might have to do the same thing with you and ask you about your philosophies in your life.
Oh, I mean, it's not so formal or organized. You know, I have this you know, bare minimum morality of just trying to be decent to people. And as for metaphysics, you know, I fluctuate between, I guess, you know, your basic Platonic and Aristotelian outlooks. Although the older I get, the more I have to admit to myself that it's always been somewhat more Platonic, even though I talk a good Aristotelian game. So,
I love
uh,
that you have a 5 hour conversation with someone else, and then I ask you about yours, and you're like, oh, it's just one sentence. It's like, that's it. That's it. You can sum me up, and I don't believe you for a second. I think there are definitely way more than that. But
oh yeah,
yeah, as I said, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your insight into the art that you create and your view of the world. And yeah, I think I hope that I get to speak to you again soon because yeah, I definitely enjoyed it.
absolutely anytime. This has been a delight, and it's an honor to be on here. Thanks for having me.